Hi, thanks for joining us early morning from Denver, Gavin. Over to you.
Thanks, Giannis. It's 8 a.m. here, so good morning, good afternoon, and in case I don't see you, good evening, depending where you are. So thanks for joining today. This is the Accessibility Update 2024-2025. There's a lot that has happened. I'm here in Denver at a conference called Accessing Higher Ground, which is an accessibility conference for higher education in particular. But it's wonderful to be here to get so many people. It's been running for 25 years, and it's an incredibly inclusive and inspiring event. So I've really kind of been a lot fired up. We do accessibility, live and breathe it, but I'm excited to share some things with you today. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So I'm here mainly with a very good friend of mine, Lucy Greco, who is at Berkeley. This is a picture of her and I think 2 years ago on Berkeley campus. She has done accessibility. She's led the way in Berkeley, and is, one of the most wonderful people you can meet. She's been there over 20 years, and I would strongly encourage you to look out for any of her work. She has a great channel on YouTube where she does things like reviews washing machines for accessibility, and it's really insightful and wonderful. So she's a great person. Watch out for Lucy. So what is new in accessibility? We're going to look at that. A quick look at the European Accessibility Act, because that's massively important. At the same time, we have a pincer maneuver across the Pacific, where the Americans Disability Act has also been updated. I wanted to show you quickly a bit of work, a massive piece of work that's been done on what's called the Web Almanac 2024 Accessibility Update, and also just some tips on how to make accessibility successful in your organization. Please let me know any questions as we go, and we can chat at the end as well. So what I wanted to get across is there's this perfect storm now happened in accessibility, where we have many things like the legal updates, the cultural coming together, inclusivity and technology as well, all making accessibility really come to the forefront of what we do in digital. And it's massively positive, because when we build for accessibility, when we design for accessibility, we make much better products. And that, if I could really get one thing across for everyone, particularly if you are actually kind of producing a digital product or service, is that it will make your service and product better. So, there's a lot more activists, influencers, and organizations now promoting accessibility, and that's led to a lot of great things. There's some legal updates that we'll look at in a minute. AI, also very exciting. There's so many positive things there, from summarizing documents, summarizing meetings. Text is such a perfect thing for assistive technology in general, as well as structure. So I'd encourage you to look at AI and how that can help and make things more accessible. And also the standards have been updated. Probably many of you know that now WCAG 2.2 is very much available and released. And in fact, WCAG 3.0, which is the next major update, is coming to a maturity. It doesn't have a release date yet, but it will be a significant change, and they will move away from the single A, double A, triple A to just being a kind of conformance or not type approach. Yeah, look out for more updates on that. WCAG 2.2 has some really helpful guidelines in there too that actually affect everybody, like how to make sure that getting rid of captures and all that sort of difficulties that we have cognitively that so many of our websites have forced upon us for years, and also how to complete forms and really good usability stuff. So I want to cover off the European Accessibility Act. Could you just shout out who has heard of the European Accessibility Act? Just say yes, yay, whatever you like.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so there's some people have. It is a very important piece of legislation that's come out. Yes, and more. Excellent. It's obviously put together by the EU, and is kind of heavily inspired from the great work that they did with GDPR and the launch of GDPR. And I think there's a lot of learnings and best practices that they're hoping to take from GDPR. Obviously, every organization in the world basically knew when to roll out GDPR and knew like that they had to do something. And the great hope with the EAA, the European Accessibility Act, is it will be quite similar and, you know, and successful. It comes into, so it's already passed legislation. It comes into effect for organizations from June 2025. So that's incredibly soon. And basically it affects all organizations in general, any digital product or service. The key objective is really to ensure that all products and services are accessible to all individuals, and is especially empowering people with disabilities. The scope is really focused a lot on the direction towards the consumer. So the public services and all that have already been addressed in terms of legally, previously in Europe under, I think it's called the Web Accessibility Declaration, it's WAD. But this EAA is a lot around kind of going directly to the consumer. So anything to do with e-commerce, transport, finance, any of those kind of key areas. But it basically says that you need to make your website comply with WCAG 2.1 AA as the primary standard. And obviously the key areas are things like, you know, making visual content really clear, you know, using structure in your digital products so that they're very easy to use and navigate for assistive technologies, using text alternatives for screen readers and similar, and also just making your user interface compliant. So from obviously it's everyone in Europe, and each of the countries will have to will choose whether how they implement the legislation. So they can either just take it directly from Europe, or they can change it slightly based on their market as well. There are fines and restrictions and so forth. So that's a new thing from the kind of GDPR learning. And yeah, it's also really looking to widen customer bases and foster a positive brand image for people. You know, that if you work inclusively, that's a better way to provide a service. So I think I just wanted to cover off who isn't affected. Who is exempt. So the only exemptions at the moment for the EAA are organizations with revenues of under 2 million euros or small organizations with less than 10 employees. If you are, you know, on either side of those, then it is affecting your organization, and will do as soon as you reach those numbers. So I just wanted to quickly point out what's the worst that can happen. So we know with GDPR that I think one of the big reasons it got so much attention was that the famous 4% of your global revenue fine that seemed to resonate very deeply with most leaders in the organizations.
Gavin.
Hey, Janus.
Can we take a quick question from my Aarhus friend Klaus, who
certainly
has kept his hand up as a...
Okay, sorry, I can't see that.
Thank you. I was just wondering if our understanding is that this is only for consumer-facing software, right? So we, being a B2B business, we do not have to care yet, right? Or...
I'm glad you brought that up, Klaus, because I think it's a little bit also the question that led some CMS vendors to join this.
Yeah. So that is a difficult one. I know with certain kind of password protected pieces and internally facing or B2B, you still have obligations because you do need to provide accommodations. I'd need to look at it again, but I don't think the EAA is necessarily calling out B2B. It is more focused on B2C.
Yeah, exactly. That was also what we saw from looking at the Danish implementation of the legislation, that it was very much focused on consumers. But we have not brought it up with any lawyers or anything. That was just our own feeling.
Yeah.
Do you want to chime in? I know this was also a big question of yours. Let's see if Sebastian can talk, or any other.
Sorry, yes. I mean, I made my thoughts on it, and for me, different angles. First of all, it's most related to B2C, and second, what is, let's say, the European directive is about, that it is for all public organizations, what I read on the website of the EU government, so public organizations. And there is one thing mentioned, that it is for the front end. We all agree front end is fine, but also for the tools they use in public organization. And that is my main question, as we are software vendor. What does mean tools and so on? I don't think it's for B2B companies.
I will look at that specifically and come back to you, because I know with certain other legislation it does cover that, but I actually don't know with the EAA if it covers that or not. So let me clarify that, or I'll follow up with Yannis afterwards.
All right. Thank you very much, Gavin. Thank you, Klaus, Sebastian. Back to you, and back to
to Ireland. So what Ireland have done in their legislation is actually said that people can go to jail if their website, well, if their digital products and services are deemed as being, grossly inaccessible. So that's kind of new and quite shocking. It's the only country that I'm aware of so far that has done that in the legislation, and is kind of almost a step further than the GDPR piece. Ireland are very strong on accessibility. So yeah, that's an interesting one. So we looked at already who's exempt, and I think there is a question there. It also does depend on which market, but if we just focus on the EAA, I think it'd be good to get an answer around that. I quite like this. So with GDPR, you probably remember, if anyone knows Tim, and he kind of made this quite famous for me, which was, the privacy by design slogan. And I really like with the EAA, they've used a similar kind of approach as something memorable, which is design for all, as a catchphrase. And I hope that will keep in people and resonate with them through the coming years as well, when they think of EAA and how to make products and services successful. So yeah, speaking of which, I thought I'd just mention a couple of pieces that I've learned about how to make accessibility a success in an organization. And these have changed for me over the years. I've definitely gone from the grassroots up. And I believe now that the best way is, to really find friends in your organization, find other people who have a passion and interest in accessibility. And with them, then go to your leadership and, communicate with your leadership how important accessibility is, and express that it's now essential in the same way that physical accessibility is for our products and services. I feel that the people first way is the most successful way, because everything else will then follow from there. You'll figure out what to do next. You can have audits and, bring in other services and consultants and training and all of those other good things. But I think it's good to build a community first, actually. So I think some key takeaways on accessibility for 2025, the European Accessibility Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this was updated. Okay, who knows about the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act? Could you again just shout out, say hello, or make some kind of noise?
No.
You don't know it. Okay, right. I'll need to update you. So the ADA was obviously a very old act. I can't even remember. It might be like 1990 or something like that. And was a very important piece of legislation. The challenge it had until recently is that it was a little bit unclear when going to court exactly how you would say something was inaccessible. And what they did is they updated Title II, which is the digital accessibility piece of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the kind of famous one in web. And they tied it to WCAG 2.1 AA standard. So they said that your digital product has to comply with that standard. And in doing that, it creates clarity for law and so forth, and measurement, which is super important. This comes into effect in 2 years from April, so April 2026, for all public service organizations. And that is also back-end tools. So that's like any staff facing, any B2B facing, any B2C facing piece. It's not yet on the B2C side. That's coming later in the law. So at the moment it is for public sector, but that's huge. So that's all government websites and education and health and etc. And I'd also like to say about the accessibility first design approach. I think that is, I've seen that more and more happening, and the standards are so excellent. You know, I appreciate they're impossible to understand, and the WCAG itself is such a difficult and almost inaccessible thing to read. However, there are so many great summaries, and accessibility, when you come down to actually engineering it and designing for it, is easy. There's a lot of great things to think about and discuss, but it is actually easy. Yeah, also WCAG 2.2. So I'd like to ask, is your organization taking any action because of the EAA? Has anyone got anything that's actually happening already? That's the end of my slide deck. I'm going to stop there.
All right. Thank you very much, Gavin. Perhaps I can pass it over to you, Bob, just to hear it from a different voice. Anything happening at Squiz?
So we actually do have an accessibility auditor built into our software. And it's something that our clients value and that our prospects find attractive. So it's of key importance to me that we maintain a finger on the pulse of accessibility and what's required. So this is a very good session for me. I have not heard, as an American-based sales representative, I've not heard much about this other than what Janus has exposed me to through my engagement with his group. But this is something that I want to take forward and make sure that we remain current in the development stages or development efforts of our platform to make sure we remain current. I was wondering if compliance requirements are expected to evolve rapidly as 2.2, which has been released, becomes more as more people become aware of it, and also when 3.0 is WCAG 3.0 is released. I was wondering how quickly we might see evolution of the acceptance or the compliance requirements.
Already in the UK government have said that they will, I think it's from October this year, they will start to use 2.2. So it's already in effect from that perspective. The Americans, as we just saw, the ADA update is for 2.1. I think that's because, yeah, the last thing was 2.0, and realistically, you have to give people time to implement new guidelines as well. You know, so it's taking a realistic approach. And I expect we will see 2.2 updates to compliance in the next couple of years. And, you know, 3 is real. I honestly think that WCAG 3 is probably maybe 5 years away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and also here in the United States, I think that, you know, compliance with the ADA is largely enforced by lawyers that are looking for ways to build class action lawsuits and things like that. Is there any difference in how the EAA is going to be enforced?
So I can talk to the UK side. The UK side definitely towards the public sector proactively go out and audit and communicate with organizations and say to them, hey, we found these issues, you need to fix them. Otherwise we'll, you know, look at legal action against you. So that started happening for the first time about 2 years ago in the UK, which is the absolute first. And I think the EU's approach is quite similar, you know, sort of audit. Certainly it is in Ireland. Definitely it's called the NDA, the National Disabilities Association. They proactively scan and audit and warn people, you got to fix this. So it's, yeah, you're right. In the US, there's a lot of lawyers involved as well. Interestingly, there's a lot of statistics around this. A lot of things are settled out of court, and it's more about kind of getting the right thing to happen. So it's, you know, it's a lot of positive legal action that actually does happen in the US.
All right. So perhaps let's jump to Copenhagen and our member there who keeps the trains running, Birgitte. I was just curious to hear from your side. I know accessibility has been a thing in Danish government for years, but are you seeing progress in this area? Is it easier now to do the right thing than it was just a few years ago?
Yes, but technically, but the awareness from the rest of my house is not very big. Up until now, we've actually just bought someone to fix little issues. I've bought a accessible website that they develop on constantly to fix little things. So that's a lot better than it was before, that I don't have to tell them all the little mistakes someone tell us. But we share the CMS, a lot of people who all work with accessibility. So I think most mistakes are fixed. But next week I have a presentation for the entire department, minister's department, about accessibility and what it is and why we need to work differently in all our documents and the ways we do our texts. And I think we try to make the letters we send to citizens, if they write to us, we are not sure that the letters in our replies are actually accessible because of some technical stuff in our systems, and we need to fix that. But in order to do that, we need to make people aware that they can do stuff themselves, and they have to use the right templates and stuff like that. So I think all the little things are still a bit hard.
Thank you. Yeah, we're making progress, it sounds, but it takes time.
Exactly.
How about our Italian friend, Francesco? I know you've worked with this, also joining from the European University Institute, Higher Education in Italy. How are you seeing things here as we are approaching 2025, Francesco? Is it getting better in Italy?
So my main concern was related to the previous question. Like we're also very, very concerned, or if you want to use a more positive word, curious about how this will be enforced and how much time will we have. The situation here is that we are compliant with many services, but definitely not with all of them.
So I know that you've been looking also at the CMS market, procuring various tools. I think back to the comment that Sebastian made earlier, one thing is the lawyers and compliance, but I think if customers like you, Francesco, or others on this call start adding accessibility to the procurement list of requirements, also in the interface, I think we'll see a bigger change. Is that something that you've started doing, Francesco?
Yes, in the last call for tender that we have run, we have inserted like WCAG 2.1 as a strict requirement.
So on the public-facing part, or is it also on the backend interface?
In order to make it a bit more mild and flexible, because that could have been like very hard to achieve, like we basically wrote it in a way in the call for tender that the system, so the tenderer will have to ensure that the system is able to ensure that we can reach that level of accessibility, because that also depends on like how the editors use it, of course. So it cannot be like guaranteed by the provider itself, but yeah, it's still there.
I think what I'm seeing, I'm in Montreal these days, and I'm no expert on Canadian standards, but I'm seeing it particularly in large, complex organizations, let's say in banks, regulated industries, where they have 10,000 colleagues or more, that they're increasingly concerned that they will run into problems if the working conditions are poor. In other words, if they have somebody working in the communications team or marketing team who cannot use the Little Forest interface or the Magnolia interface or whatever they have procured. So I think on your point, Klaus, from earlier, I don't think the EAA will start by enforcing that part. But I'm seeing movement that I haven't seen just a few years ago, where organizations are saying, it's going to put us in a bad spot if we procure something now that we hope will last 5-6 years. But because who knows in 2030, if we will be faced by a lawsuit, or perhaps also with skilled labor shortage, we have people on staff that are excellent. Like you mentioned Lucy in the beginning of the call, Gavin, and I've also had the pleasure of working with her, and she's like pretty direct in saying that CMS vendors have failed us so far.
I agree to your comment, Janos, and that's also our take on it, is that I think we're quite positive, realizing that it's not something we need to do before June next year, because that would have been next to impossible, but also thinking that it's more a market demand rather than it's actually legislation that is going to force us into it, because we have big clients that we're talking with who are starting to ask about this. So I think it can be sort of like a green fee you have to pay to enter at least a piece of software like ours into a big corporation. Definitely. That it will be.
I'm going to pass it over to, thank you, Klaus. Thank you, everybody, also for making this an interactive call. I'm going to pass it over to you, Gavin, for the infamous last words from Denver.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for joining. It's great that people are interested and care. It is the best topic, really, because it's so people-focused, and I think it gives us all a lot of purpose and enjoyment to be connected properly with people and to make our services better in that way. I wanted to also just share finally one link with you, which is something called the Almanac, which is the web archive. It's been updated every year, and there's a 2024 update and it's accessibility analysis. I've just put the link on the chat. Perhaps Yannis, you can share it later with everyone. And there's some really positive improvements across the top 1 million websites in the world. Effectively, have a quick scan through. It's a massive document, but it's really, really great work. And actually, the guy who does this, Mike Gifford, he's from Civic Actions, not too far from you, Yannis. Actually,
exactly, Ottawa. That's right.
Yeah, he's actually the primary author, I believe, on this. So have a look at that. It's really, it's encouraging to see improvements.
Hey, we were able to do this. Thank you very much, Gavin, for condensing all your progress, all your thinking for next year into 20, 25 minutes, enabling us to have a Q&A, almost as if we were meeting in person. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you, Gavin. Once again, thanks to everybody for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day, morning, etc. All the best.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Say hi to Lucy, Gavin.
Will do. Definitely. I'll see her very soon.